Last year, when we first started the Bits and Blocks collab, we were really excited because we thought this whole Bitcoin thing, it's more. It's a bigger deal than just money. And before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge that there's probably a lot of people in this room who know a lot more about Bitcoin than I do, even though I've been working with it for about a year now. And there's also a good portion of you guys who probably don't. And so my job here is to lay the groundworks for the understanding of our communication for the rest of the night. And so to do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the terminology. So oftentimes if you go online, media or whatever, you'll see that this is a very confusing topic area. There's lots of words being thrown around, and tonight I'd like to talk about three. So the first is Bitcoin, the second is blockchain, and the last is public ledgers. And let's go into Bitcoin a little bit. For those of you who don't really know that much about blockchain or Bitcoin, you can relax. You don't need to be too nervous. You can take a deep breath because really on the fundamental level, Bitcoin is really just money, though it offers some very, very interesting potential, which we'll get to later. But if Scott could come up for me, and we'll do a little quick demo about the physical and digital world. So, for example,
get cash. All right.
Yeah, you get
like
cash. So, for example, in the physical world, if I want to transfer value, for example, if I wanted to give Scott maybe $1. So we have this piece of paper right here, So if I give this to
All
Scott, now Scott, did I give you $1?
Yes.
Yes. Are you sure I gave you $1?
No. Yes. I had to take a second at least.
All right. Now, does everyone else see that I gave Scott $1? Yeah. So with that piece of paper comes all these social constructs and cultural norms that establish that that piece of paper is worth value. And then when transferred over, I'm actually giving Scott $1. Scott, do you have a phone on you right now?
I do.
Yeah. Could you take it out? All right. Now, in the internet world or in the mobile world, for example, I can't really do the same thing. For example, Scott, will you hold your phone up for me? All right, now.
Nothing.
I just said I gave you $1. Now, do you believe that I just gave you $1?
No.
Now, does anyone else believe that I gave him $1?
No notification.
Well, you're right, because I didn't give him $1. Now, in the internet world and the digital world, we can't really do these things without intermediaries. And intermediaries like PayPal or your bank provide a very valuable service that allow you to accomplish things that you couldn't do before. And though they provide a very valuable service, oftentimes when intermediaries are entering the system, they do offer both valuable services, but also some friction. For example, intermediaries, we must all acknowledge, are businesses, and naturally, they must charge fees for what the services that they provide. And so that often introduces additional costs. And by handing it to another person before I get to Scott, well, that might introduce additional time or additional wait time for him to receive his value or whatever. And so maybe it'll slow down the processes. And potentially, a lot of times, intermediary companies or things like that like to develop their own proprietary technologies and systems, so they can distinguish themselves from other people. But that often means that they don't really talk to each other, and oftentimes my bank won't talk to your bank, and it might take a good amount of time for things to interact. And also, businesses are businesses, and they have their own target customer segments. And so oftentimes, a particular intermediary is focused on addressing the problems of a particular population, and they'll often leave other segments of the population alienated or left out. So there are built-in prejudices into many intermediaries. And so what Bitcoin is really the cash for the internet. So with the Bitcoin schema and everything, it introduces those social contracts, and there's heavy math behind it that allow me to transfer Bitcoin to Scott just in the same easy way that I gave him cash. All right.
All right. You ready to take it back? Or
Yeah.
do I get to get-
All right. So
All right.
you can sit back down.
All right.
All right. So, but you might ask, how is Bitcoin the cash of the internet? Well, it is through a thing known as blockchains, our second term. Now, what are blockchains really? What do they do? Well, blockchains allow for Bitcoin to overcome a fundamental principle of the internet that has been true since the existence. It is that if I transfer something to you, it is copied and not moved. For example, on all my interactions, when I email something to you, when I send you texts or anything like that, well, there is no guarantee for you that after I sent you that message, that I do not have it anymore. And as you might imagine, that might be very problematic with money. So blockchains make sure that your money is actually moved and not copied. Now, how do they actually do that? Well, they do that through what is known as distributed ledgers, or your public ledger. And what is your distributed ledger? Well, this is your complete history of all transaction that has ever happened within the system. And it is shared globally, as well as publicly audible by anybody within the system. So anyone can go in and look at it. And it's often backed by heavy cryptography and a network of verifiers distributed throughout the world. We can go into that later if you guys want to hit me up later, but we're going to skip that for now. Now, so money is really just the beginning. It's just the start of everything, because the transfer of money is really just the transfer of value. And there's a lot more value than simply just money. For example, imagine maybe I want to actually transfer my house deeds to someone else, maybe to my child or something like that. And instead of finding a lawyer and getting all this paperwork and all these documents that show this person owns this and that and whatever, I can just transfer it over. Or maybe I want to share my medical documents, these sensitive pieces of information that should follow me throughout my life so that everyone knows how to treat me. However, right now it's stored with your doctor or with your hospital, and it doesn't really follow you where you go. Or maybe you have particular types of money, like today we have currencies or gift cards or points or whatever, miles, whatever people use nowadays. Maybe we can transfer them or actually use them at other services. Or last of all, what if you could capture the inception of value, like the actual creation of a patent or the creator of music or the author of a book or something like that. And so we really call you guys here today to sort of pick your brains and see what can you imagine, because what we believe is that the potential of blockchain is truly awesome, and that blockchains and energy has some great potential that we could potentially see in the future. And so some of the few things that come to mind really quickly is, what about really low cost transactions? So like microtransactions, like you have your distributed network and maybe I'm paying my neighbor a little amount for when I'm producing energy or something like that. Or maybe you have various pipelines or machines that are talking to each other. Your solar panel is talking to your TV or something like that. And they're able to transfer value between each other. And that brings me to my next question is, what if you could have autonomous, rule-driven, rule-based payments? So if something happens, well then I get paid a particular amount. Or what if using this technology, we can create new markets, new services, using that information that don't exist today because we have a new medium to play with. So, before I go, I'll leave you guys with a pun or two and a little thought to think about. And it's, what if we could stream payments like we could power? Or what if we could rewire commerce like we are currently rewiring the grid with smart grid technology? Thank you very much.